Hello everybody. Today I would like to talk about communication, or at least I would like to ask James about non-violent communication. James and me both spend quite some time on Facebook now and talk to the people there, try to make some important points regarding enlightenment and how to live a peaceful life. And I think it's important during that procedure to also realize non-violent communication. And maybe, James, you can make a comment on why do people have such a hard time on Facebook to speak non...
In a non-violent way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of defensiveness and aggressiveness, and particularly defensiveness and arrogance that you see in the Facebook communications. People seem to think that that they have to defend their positions, whatever their statements, whatever they are, because very often when I ask questions in a very neutral way, in a very simple way, they immediately go negative, and I can see why people keep switching Facebook groups and moving around and all this. I think part of the problem is Facebook itself, because it's a really superficial place to communicate. You have this idea of likes and dislikes, and likes and dislikes are not a good basis on which to from which to communicate on people. And the reason is this: when you're communicating with someone else, you think that there's just you and that other person communicating back and forth. So in your mind, communication's just a two-way street, me and this person. But actually the communication is 8 ways, because what I mean by that is reality is made up of pure consciousness, yourself, which isn't involved in any communication. It's just the witness of all the communications. And it doesn't have any likes or dislikes. If you're actually that person, that self, if you're just limitless awareness, you won't be offended or exhilarated by any comments you experience. See? But below that level of communication, that non-dual level of communication, there's a subconscious or an unconscious level of communication. And when we say unconscious, we don't mean that the unconscious isn't conscious. We mean that it's sub or unconscious to the next layer, which is the person, the human being. So your subconscious and my subconscious are constantly reading each other. Okay? My subconscious knows what your subconscious is projecting, and your subconscious knows what my subconscious is projecting. But you don't know what my subconscious is projecting, and probably not what your subconscious is projecting, and I don't know what your subconscious is projecting, and you don't know what my subconscious is projecting. So we've got a big problem here. We've got the self, which observes and experiences the communication without judgment. Then we've got a subconscious level, which is all our biases and opinions. All our beliefs and opinions are all on that level. So that's active all the time. And then the next level down is what? Is your ego and my ego. We call that the subtle body.
So there's 3 levels.
So there's basically 3 levels. Now, it's no problem if you're communicating from the self's point of view, because you can communicate reasonably, politely, friendly, in a non-violent way. I won't try to defend my position if I'm speaking from the self's level. I won't try to attack your position if you're communicating from the self's level. So we can have disagreements on that level without involving our emotions. if you're communicating from the self's point of view. But if you're communicating from the ego's point of view, and you think you're right about your point of view, and you have something to defend, and you think the other person is attacking your point of view, then you're going to have all kinds of emotional issues operating when you communicate. So communication, even if we leave the self out of it and just assume that we're people, because most people don't know how to communicate from the self's point of view. They say they're the self, but when it comes to communicating, they don't communicate from that point of view. They communicate purely from the ego point of view. In fact, saying that you're the self, they feel gives them a special kind of status and maybe makes them beyond all the rules, so they don't need to be polite and friendly and so forth and so on. So what you've got is, you've got not only you have these three layers, but then you have an up and down communication that you're not necessarily aware of. Understand? So you're communicating with your subconscious every time you act. Your subconscious is reading what you're communicating. And my conscious mind, my ego, is communicating with my subconscious, and it's communicating back to me, because the subconscious is what's causing your reactions. And then my conscious is communicating with your subconscious, and your subconscious is communicating with my conscious. So there's a line of communication going this way, going up and down this way for both sides, and then going across. So you've got 8 factors, 8 dynamic factors operating in any kind of communication. Now, if you don't know how to communicate from the self's point of view, it's possible to communicate in an intelligent way and in a non-violent way from the ego's point of view. And how would you do that? Well, you have to be paying attention to your speech. Ideally, you should be paying attention to your thinking, and before you say something, you should think first what the impact of that statement is going to be on the other person. But when your unconscious is in control, you don't think first before you communicate, before you say something. You just immediately, when I say something, it creates a reaction in you, and you just react emotionally to what I say. If it's either you like it if it's in harmony with your beliefs and opinions, or you dislike it if it's not in harmony with your beliefs and opinions. So ideally, you should monitor your thinking and take it easy, and particularly in Facebook, you've got time to do that, because you've got a minute or two to think before you have to post. The person is not expecting you to fire it off immediately. Some people are just really fast typers. They don't even think, they just type whatever they feel instantly. Right? But you do have an opportunity in Facebook to think before you speak. And if you can't think before you speak, at least you should monitor your speech. In other words, pay attention to what you're saying and think about, the impact and observe the impact on the other person. If that immediately sets up a problem with that other person, then you need to be aware that you're the one that's creating that. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have differences of opinion and you shouldn't necessarily have emotions, because in Vedanta, we're happy to debate with you, but we expect you to have some kind of logic behind your statements. Like, for example, one of the communications recently has been on this topic. Many people in the neo world talk about nothingness. This is a big topic in the modern non-dual world, and these people are highly defended on this topic. They don't want to hear any other. But whenever I present the logic for the logic against emptiness or nothingness as it is understood. And most people that present this argument do not explain carefully what nothingness or emptiness means.
Mm.
They just, it's clear to me that they just picked up these ideas from Buddhism or from the Neo world, and they just believe those ideas, but they don't have any logic to support it, and they don't have any definition of what emptiness or nothingness is. So now I will ask them a question that indicates that Vedanta has thought through the nothingness issue, the nothingness, emptiness idea, and has and that there is a sophisticated and very logical argument against using that word and against the idea that there is nothingness.
Mm.
And so, now when I present that, what will happen is a person who believes in nothingness, that person will immediately dislike me.
Mm.
And they'll start arguing with me right away. And then maybe I'll continue asking questions. It's good when you're communicating to ask questions to establish the definitions with the other person.
Mm.
You
Makes
should,
sense, yeah.
huh?
That makes sense.
Absolutely. You should figure out what it is they mean by the word.
Mm.
I often do that. I often say, well, what do you mean by this? Or what do you mean by that? Or what is your definition of that? Or the other thing. And usually, people do not, they ignore my questions.
Mm.
Now, why do they ignore those questions? Huh? Because they feel that maybe there's an argument coming that they don't want to, that they haven't understood, and that they don't want to consider because it may challenge their views.
Yeah.
I asked some people. I've asked several times. I would repeat the question, and they would just refuse to answer it, or they'd tell me, "Oh, that's all intellectual, and that doesn't matter." It means what? They don't want to discuss the topic. Now, if you're going to Facebook, or into any forum, or in life, even. If you're just walking around trying to make people understand how spiritual and intelligent you are, then what's the point?
Mm.
And nobody really wants to know how enlightened or intelligent you are. We want to have a normal human communication about important topics.
Yeah.
Who am I? And so forth and so on. So this whole problem of communication, it's a skill. And if your communications are hijacked by your likes and dislikes, and if you're attached to your likes and dislikes, your beliefs and your opinions and prejudice and so forth and so on, then you're going to have trouble.
Mm.
And if you're truly an inquirer or truly a seeker, you should be happy to have illogical and irrational and non-commonsensical views refuted by logic and reason.
Mm.
You see? You should be happy to learn something about yourself. But what I've discovered in Facebook is because it's such a superficial thing, people are posturing, people are arguing, people are contentious in that environment.
Mm.
And they're very, very sensitive, overly sensitive because of this like and dislike thing. And as soon as you start to ask them probe a little more deeply into their minds or into their thinking, they often shut off and go away, and they leave the group or they start to insult you.
Mm.
It's never my intention to insult anybody or cause any problems for anybody, actually. But if a person makes a statement that's just patently ridiculous, that just flies in the face of common sense, then I think then I would like to understand why they expect me to believe that and why they think that's true.
Mm.
Because in the spiritual world, there's this huge problem. It's always been there, and it's always going to be there, of magical thinking. People just think that that there's some kind of mysterious thing, and that they're happy to believe any kind of irrational, nonsensical views about themselves and life and the self itself.
Yeah, it's quite tamasic. It's quite dull, actually, if you think about it.
Yes, absolutely. It's the intellect of many people is very, very dull.
Mm.
And
I mean, it's not their intellect, it's just the tamaguna, this heavy energy,
that's right,
which is
absolutely.
taking over.
That's right.
Nothing personal.
It isn't. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's and those tamaguna and rajaguna and these ideas just mean that there are subconscious energies operating in everybody,
Mm.
particularly denial.
Yeah.
That's called tamaguna. Particularly denial. And then they don't want, that means I don't want to look at anything that will make me look bad,
Mm.
or anything that will contradict my own good opinion of myself.
Mm.
Because, people get all puffed up with their spiritual ideas, and when it's pointed out that that idea is illogical or irrational, then what? If they feel bad about themselves, they think, oh, I made a mistake, or their self-esteem suffers from that.
Yeah.
So they can't afford to compromise their self-esteem, so they just deny any reasonable or rational or intelligent argument.
Yeah.
But Vedanta's a rational and constructively critical and provocative teaching. You're not meant to just you're not just meant to swallow what we say. You're meant to think about it. And if you have an argument, please present the logic, and we're happy to debate with you.
Yeah, contemplation is a big part of Vedanta. It's not only reading and listening and copying the quotes, but it's actually contemplation, the contemplation about it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people find, in the spiritual world, they find that they find ideas that are very inspiring to them and seem to be very true.
Emptiness might be one of them.
Yeah,
The idea of emptiness
Yeah, emptiness
can be quite liberating to some extent.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a particular state of mind that happens to people, and basically, I think what emptiness means, but it means different things to different people, so you can't really say it. But what the emptiness teaching means that doesn't mean that there's nothingness. It means that the objects that you perceive are value neutral. They're empty of projections.
Mm.
That is, they can mean anything. So a tree, for example, isn't making a statement, I'm a tree. It's just an object that's empty of meaning. Now I can say that's a beautiful tree, or I can say that's an ugly tree, or that's, I can make statements like that, in which case I'm projecting meaning there. And what that teaching is saying, I think, I don't know actually because I haven't studied Buddhism carefully, but is that because all the objects that we experience are value neutral, they are available for projections.
Mm.
And when you're back to this topic of communication, when you're communicating with anybody, try to find the value in their speech.
Yeah. The motivation.
The motivation, why they're saying what they're saying, and in any case, so emptiness and nothingness and these ideas need to be explained properly. I mean, the reason we have a problem with the word when people say there is nothingness, for example.
Mm.
That's a common statement. There is nothingness. Well, now that statement is obviously absurd. The reason is because if there's nothingness, then you wouldn't know that there was nothingness.
Mm.
If everything is nothing, you hear these statements made all the time, then there couldn't be any way to know it. But if there is nothingness, and we'll give you that nothingness is an idea, or even if there is such a thing as nothingness, then what? That nothingness cannot exist unless it's known to exist.
Mm.
Which means that there's always a factor that knows nothingness. And it wouldn't be nothingness, because nothingness can't know anything, because it's nothing. Nothing can't know something, only something can know something, i.e. nothingness or somethingness. So there's always this presence of the self. In fact, in Vedanta, we say there's only the self, there's no other thing other than the self. That's what we say. So if there is, if in the event that there is some object called nothingness, it would only be known because there was the self, which means what? There is not nothingness.
By self you mean limitless awareness.
By self I mean...
not a limited person.
Yeah, that's right. By self I mean limitless awareness. You. In Vedanta we don't think that the limited person is you. We say it's an object. And in fact that's your own experience. You know what you are thinking and feeling. Why do you know what you are thinking and feeling? You know what your life, how your life is going. Why? Because you're the consciousness that's observing your life all the time. So there's always this separation between you, the person, and the consciousness, you, that's observing the person. See? So nothingness is a category, an ontological category that doesn't bear investigation. But because in the modern spiritual world, and going all the way back to Shunyata Buddhism and before, people don't investigate the meaning of the words. They don't actually get into and look at it from the self's point of view, from the jiva's point of view, from the world's point of view. They don't look at it from different points of view to see if that idea holds up. They just what? It coincides with one of their experiences or one of their beliefs, and so they just pick it up, they latch onto it, and they get stuck in that notion. You know, nothingness doesn't help, because the whole question is love here. The whole question is happiness and satisfaction and love, and nothingness doesn't provide happiness or satisfaction or love. Right? We're here to discover the non-dual, the positive non-dual love that is our own nature, and this whole idea of nothingness doesn't satisfy that need at all, and that's why these people argue. If they actually understood who they were, they'd be so satisfied with themselves, they wouldn't be attached to this idea of nothingness, or any other spiritual idea. There's another idea about celestial beings and extraterrestrial beings and fairies and angels and all this sort of thing, you know, that fascinate people. But it's only because they're not fascinated or satisfied within themselves that these ideas or these entities that are projected by their minds become meaningful to them and become things or ideas that they need to defend. So.